So while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to go to the green and the red. And I'm going to start with the red. I'm going to take a little bit of this neutral and put it into the red and test. That looks like a very nice color. And we're going to paint this square. Don't want to run out of paint. It's always important to test. Do not guess. If it looks too brown, add a little bit more red. You don't want it to be too far off from the original color. Now we'll do the green. Take a little bit of the brown neutral that we made and mix it into the green and test. And I'm going to paint next to our original green. And you'll notice that I'm not letting my brush be filled with water when I clean the brush, so that you're not diluting your original pigment. That's very important. Make sure you mix enough so you don't run out. It's very important. I know I keep repeating myself. There's your green. Back to our yellow. And we don't have a whole lot of neutral left. I should have mixed more neutral. So we could be in trouble, but then again we might not be. So I'm going to take some of this and mix it into the yellow, and that should give us our next step. Test, looks good. Let's paint. Everything's still wet, so I'm going to pull this all down and pick up whatever puddle there is. And I'm going to mix the violet into my neutral because I don't have a lot of neutral left. See, here's the problem, is that I didn't mix enough. So do as I say, not as I do. But I'm just going to make it here with this color. But you notice I did not dilute the color in order to get more paint out of it. I'm just living with what I've got. All right, let's do the last reds. So now we're going to take more neutral here and mix it into the red and test. We still want it to look red. I gotta get more of a point on my brush, so I took some of the pigment out of the brush because I still have plenty in the puddle to use on the square. All right, now I'll pick up whatever excess there is, and this particular one is finished. Now it's really interesting. If you look at this and this, you notice how green that is. It's really interesting. It's the relationship of colors next to one another that can throw you off. So now I'm going to do the green. All right, so clean my brush, take the moisture out, add more brown to this green, and test. All right, we'll let this dry and see how it looks. Now, as you can see here, this might be a little too yellow. And this is not concentrated enough. So what do we can try and remix this neutral because we don't have very much of it left here in this tray. And I did add purple to this so that I could do this particular square. But in fact, the amount of leftover that I have here is not enough in order to make the difference. So we can do a couple of little tricky things. I can take the violet and I can thin it way down, very, very thin, so it's just the thinnest wash. Thin wash. Like so, very light. Even more. So it's just barely a wash. And I can take that and I can modify this so that it's a little bit closer to the neutral just by laying a little bit more tone onto that yellow that I've got there. And you can see now that it's closer to the neutral, but it's still yellow. So to me, that's a better step. We could even do it to this one, but I would let it be because it's not bad. Now, we can do exactly the opposite thing with this color here. But I think what I would do first, because it seems a little thin, is take this thin wash and put another layer of violet down. And let it dry. And see what we get. And if it looks too purple, we will add a very thin coat of yellow on top of that. So you can modify these mixes a little bit just if you don't get them right the first time. This guy looks like he could use a little bit more brown, but if you're going to do it, you need to thin that neutral. Here's the green neutral. Here's the neutral for the red and the green. You need to thin that down, way down, so you have a very thin coating because you don't want to overdo this. You're better off if you use multiple layers to get it to where you want it to be. So to me, just this little bit more red in this mix, which really is the neutral, I've added to this green, and it's going to look better to me. So this is how you go about creating this intensity chart. I say alternate, mix your colors, and finish something before you go to the next thing, because most of you don't have enough palettes, first of all, in order to do all these mixes simultaneously. But the next one, I would do a blue to see how that looks. And then go back to the yellow. And you're going to have to turn your board this way and that way in order to work, so you don't get yourself into a wet area that's still waiting to dry. So that's how we go about this. All right, I've just finished the French ultramarine and the orange. And I found that as I was working with the neutral and the blue, that if I put all this neutral into all of this blue, I was going to not be able to get to the color that I needed, which was this. So I took some of this, some of the neutral and some of the blue, and mixed it into my mixing tray. and created a test swatch to see if that was correct as to what I needed. And I figured if I had a full load of pigment, mixed pigment like this, that I would be able to get this entire square painted. Now the other thing about French ultramarine is, because this ultramarine has a tendency to settle, you need to paint this quickly, because if you don't, the mix will change on the page and the orange will come to the surface and the blue will settle. So you need to put this down as quickly as you can and still be careful with it. So the last one we'll do is the Prussian blue, and then we'll be done. All right, we're just about finished here. I'm finishing up the last square of Prussian blue, and then we're going to look at it and see what needs to be adjusted. I will have to wait for this to dry a little bit more before I can do anything there. But let's take a look at this. Now, I think we could probably add a little bit more violet to this whole section, but I'm going to do it very thin. And I could do it for both of these just to make them a little richer looking. So I'm going to take some violet and really thin it down in my mixing tray until it's just a slight bit different than this. Is still too dark. Really wash it down. All right, that's a real light tint. And then I'm going to go over both of these at this point just to make them a little bit more dynamic. And again, this is just a flat wash, and I think that looks better to me. I think that's the same is true with the green. I think I would like the green to be a little bit more vibrant. So I'm going to clean my tray, get the purple off of here. This is my tray with all of my primaries and secondaries. So I'm going to take some green, thin it way down, thin it way down. Test, test, test. Okay, that looks pretty good. Remember, whenever you add a layer, it's just like in graphite. You're always increasing the density of the color. Okay, very good. All right, so I think this is done now. And as I say, you can always modulate things a little just by using your original primaries and going over things. Just when you are doing the initial steps, do not dilute all of these other colors that you have, that you've created, the neutrals, and mixing them. Do not dilute it with water, because it's just going to create more of a headache for you. Make sure you mix enough color. You can see I've really used a lot of these colors, used a lot of the pigments up in the process of doing this, because this particular chart requires a great deal of mixing and adjusting in order to get it right. So there you have it. This is going to be a very busy week for you. I have to tell you, these charts, I've been doing this for a long time, and these charts take me a couple of hours at least a piece, because you have to wait in between. Do not leave these until Friday in order to hand them in. You must start them now and get them done during the week so that you have some time. All right, that's it. Good luck.